My name is Carson Tank. My topic is Brexit. This is a very politically divisive topic right now in the news and pretty modern, so it was pretty fun to work with. It took place during the years 2016 up to 2020. And what's interesting about that is that's actually when Donald Trump ran and became president. So maybe there's some crossover there. We'll have to see. So, first of all, what is Brexit? It's a very unusual word. It sounds like brunch, lunch, exit, but really what it is you have Great Britain, the country, we've talked about, and they're exiting the European Union. So they were part of this pact of countries, but now they're saying that they want out and they want nothing to do with the European Union. And during this presentation, we're going to look at why that is and how that came to come. So first off, we're going to look at the United Kingdom here. So it consists of 4 countries, very similar to states in the United States. We have England to the south with London. The north we have Scotland with Edinburgh, Glasgow, some big cities. And then we have Wales and Northern Ireland. It has 67 million people, which is quite a bit, but even more significant than its population is its economy. London is considered the finance capital of the world, and the reason because of that is because it's kind of right in the middle between America and Asia, so you can have markets kind of going all the time because of that. In addition to being the 5th largest economy, they have a GDP of 3.3 trillion a year, and they are second behind Germany in Europe. So, again, not much has changed in hundreds of years. The main 3 players are still Germany, France, and the United Kingdom. Now we're going to look at the European Union and what that is. So, the beta to the European Union was formed in 1973, called the EEC, and it followed World War II, and it's trying to integrate the economies together in order to reduce conflict. So the thought is if the countries are so independent on trade and maybe using the same currencies, they won't fight a devastating war like World War I and II because they're so tied in together. And we see that today with the United States and China, how close we are. Another goal is to make all regulations the same. So rather than having environmental laws in France and Germany be different, they want to make those environmental laws the same to reduce friction between the members. I think it functions largely as a confederation, like how the United States during the Civil War had the Confederate States, the Southern North Carolina, South Carolina that got together. They function as that. So the countries remain sovereignty, but they belong to this greater collective to help them be more prosperous and efficient. So the first function of the European Union is to pay membership dues. The largest economy, Germany, pays the most. That's followed by the UK and France. And it's based on how rich you are. And one of the reasons for Brexit is the people of the United Kingdom feel that they shouldn't have to pay $10 billion into this pot each year. So they pay in $10 billion to be a member, but they only get back $4 billion in receipts from the European Union. And they almost feel like they're getting screwed over by that they're investing this and they're not getting their money back. Now, the second function of the European Union is to fight things like climate change, recession, COVID, again, functioning kind of almost as a world government. As we see in this political cartoon, we have all these different things facing the European Union, and the joke is be sure to wash your hands for COVID, but there's a lot of bigger problems. Another important thing to note on with the European Union is that votes are tallied based on member countries, not representative population. So, in order for something to pass, you have to have 15 of the 27 countries go ahead and vote for it. We see this with they made environmental harming the environment criminal law in 2008, and in 1999 they established the euro, which allows you to have just one currency between all these other countries except Britain, and we're going to get to that later. I want to highlight the current exchange rate between the euro and the dollar right now. Uh, right now, the U.S. is considered the standard of the world, and the U.S. or the euro, it's looking at 0.97. So they're very close, which means the euro is very strong going off the dollar. So it's not a bad currency like Zimbabwe or some third country. It's legit. And then the third and final function of the EU is that all citizens of the EU, all citizens of member countries are also citizens of the EU. So this means that you can live and travel in the EU wherever you want to. So a big common thing is people that live in, say, England or Germany, when they want to retire cheaper, they'll go to Greece for retirement or Italy and be able to be on the beach. This function will also create some friction, though, when we start seeing immigration become a problem in the EU. So here we have our map of the EU and the member states. Almost every European country is in this, except kind of the poorer ones to the south, like Serbia. Switzerland is neutral, and then we see the United Kingdom did pull out of the EU. But it's basically all of continental Europe, which is quite an accomplishment. So we're going to start at 2008, and that's really when the British people start to question why they are in the EU. They feel like during the global recession, they got financially dragged down with the rest of Europe, and they felt their financial sectors were so strong they would not have been in a recession. That's what the Brexiters say. Now, I disagree. I think it was an international recession, but it causes strife in 2008 when they feel they're being dragged down. This strife encourages the British ambassadors to the EU to petition for an Article 50. Now, Article 50 means that a member state essentially has a wait to get out of the EU. So before, you were kind of locked into the EU for life, but Article 50 says you can get out. It has to be within your constitution. You have to have a vote, and it sets these pretenses. And we're going to see how this take effect later. Now, one of the major problems in the EU was in 2010, it was called the Greek debt crisis. And Greece one day, they were borrowing money from the EU in Germany. It's a very complex system. And one day they just said, hey, we're going to default. It's going to be bad. So they defaulted. They hit 25% unemployment, and they were basically going to drag Europe down with it, because you have to remember they use the same currency. So their currency's not good, and that means everybody else's currency is not good. So essentially what had to happen was the big three, Germany in particular, but the UK as well, they had to bail out Greece so the whole thing wouldn't go down. And this was an effective economic strategy, but many people in the United Kingdom, they felt it was not their role to bail out Greece, and they felt Greek people and politicians had a fiduciary responsibility themselves. And, why are we doing this? Next, we move on to David Cameron. We're still in the 2010. He was elected, and he was a centrist prime minister, and he said, we're going to have a referendum on Brexit. and finally settle this thing, because you're starting to get these voices saying we should just get out of the EU altogether. While Cameron's in office, we start to see a very sad thing, and this is the 2015 Syrian refugee crisis. Basically, President Assad is killing his own people using chemical weapons. Uh, they were in some sort of a civil war. It's just a very tragic thing. And obviously, the people want to get out of Syria because they don't want to get gas. So they start forming these camps, not concentration camps, but refugee camps in EU member countries just to survive. Here we have a map that essentially breaks down the migrant crisis and where they went. So if we look on the far right, we have Syria. They're going through Turkey, up the Balkans, and they're hitting places like Hungary, Austria, Czechoslovakia, Belgium, and Germany is the highest there. And they're taking in a lot of immigrants because they're a little more liberal, and also they feel some pressure from the Holocaust that they need to protect the unprotected, so to say. Also, we have the United Kingdom here, which is also taking in refugees, and they don't have a real friendly attitude about refugees. Some people think they maybe are taking their jobs. Other people think they're causing a financial toll on them. So, in addition to taking in the 20,000 refugees, they spent 3.7 billion funding refugees. And I know today we love in America to throw out the words trillion and billion, but the UK is not as big as the United States. So this is a lot of money for them, $4 billion. Also, many of the citizens, they don't have the same laissez-faire, open border policies the EU has, and they don't like seeing people being able to just come and go as they please within their island country. Here we have a picture highlighting the refugee crisis. We have a family here literally just walking the streets of London. We have a woman with a hijab, and that's literally all they own. It's just mind-boggling for me to think about. Now, because of this anti-Semitism kind of brewing, this Nigel Farage gentleman, he's kind of like I guess, the Mitch McConnell of the United Kingdom. He's not prime minister, but he holds a lot of power within his party. And he's saying, why are we taking in these immigrants? He's looking back at the Greek debt crisis and saying, why did that happen? And he's asking a lot of really tough questions to the United Kingdom government establishment about, is this whole European Union thing really worth it? Now, funny enough, he actually goes and campaigns with Donald Trump a little bit during his campaign run. And this is all happening in 2016, where you're seeing this rise of kind of right wing populism. So Nigel Farage is kind of saying these immigrants, like Trump in a way, are taking our jobs. They're hurting our culture. He's not as brash as Trump, but he comes to many of the same conclusions about immigrants and limiting the amount of immigrants. It's really fascinating to see, though, how this in 2016, the UK's woes and America's line up at the exact same time. Now, despite all odds, this Farage has this referendum saying, let's get out of the European Union. And I think David Muir breaks it down really nicely. So we're going to watch a short clip on that.
The other major story tonight, the global aftershocks after that vote in Britain, and for so many around the world, a stunning result, deciding to leave the European Union, to go it alone. Wall Street here at home plummeting more than 600 points, and the faces in Britain, those who thought there was no way this could happen. Then another surprise, the Prime Minister of Britain announcing his resignation, walking back into 10 Downing Street, his arm around his wife. And here in America, fear over Americans and their savings. The Dow ending the day down more than 600 points. And tonight, as the reality sets in, evidence some British voters may be having second thoughts. One of the top Google searches in the UK, what is the European Union? Voters asking what it is they just left. ABC's chief foreign correspondent Terry Moran with the moment overnight the UK learned this was really happening.
The epic decision coming after a long night of suspense that began the moment the polls closed.
Counting is underway of tens of millions of votes in the EU referendum.
More than 30 million votes cast, each ballot counted by hand. Within minutes, the first results and a sign of things to come. The northern working-class city of Newcastle barely voting to remain in the European Union, and nearby Sunderland, a landslide vote to leave. The market's already sensing danger as those first returns start coming in.
Really quickly, what I want to highlight is the urban versus rural divide in this Brexit vote. So your rural kind of farmers, blue-collar workers, the rural people are all going to leave the EU, and more of the establishment, white-collar jobs, they're voting to stay in. So it also kind of lines up with the American 2016 election. You see the Rust Belt swinging heavily for populism and Donald Trump, and kind of your blue-collared coastal elites going for Secretary Clinton.
The hours passed, people staying up all night, their faces etched with anxiety, a whole country on edge.
A night of great suspense, but we don't know what's going to happen, do we?
And every hour made the pattern clearer. You can see it on the map. England and Wales voting to get out of the EU. London and the suburbs voting to stay. And Scotland and Northern Ireland overwhelmingly pro-EU. So just before dawn, the BBC calls it.
The British people have spoken, and the answer is we're out.
For those who wanted to stay in the European Union, utter heartbreak. Like J.K. Rowling, creator of Harry Potter, who tweeted, "I don't think I've ever wanted magic more." And Scotland will seek independence now. But it was sweet, sweet victory for those like Nigel Farage, whose right-wing party fought for this moment for years.
The sun has risen on an independent United Kingdom.
As the morning papers blared the news, some were stunned.
I'm completely and utterly devastated. Can't actually believe it's happened.
Others delighted.
Winston Churchill would be proud of us. He'd be up there now looking down at us. Well done, Great Britain.
And the agony of defeat. Prime Minister David Cameron outside number 10 Downing Street, choking back emotion with the surprise announcement he would resign in the coming months.
I love this country, and I feel honoured to have served it.
It was an emotional campaign, and immigration was a driving issue. This controversial poster capturing the feeling of so many. Breaking point. Late morning, Prime Minister Cameron going to Buckingham Palace, meeting with Queen Elizabeth to chart a way forward. And the hangover, and in some cases, regret.
Simply because this morning the reality is actually hitting in, and the regrets are filling in.
And Terry Moran with us live from London tonight. Terry, so what next? Because this isn't simply a 24-hour aftershock. This is going to take weeks, months, perhaps years.
Exactly, David. What happens next is that Britain and Europe must now negotiate a complicated and painful divorce. There's hundreds of billions of dollars, thousands of laws that needed to get sorted out. Britain wants to go slow on that, but today European leaders say they want Britain out for good as soon as possible. David?
Terry Moran with us all day on this. Terry, thank
you. Okay, so yeah, the referendum passed. I want to go back to Cameron really quick, the prime minister who resigned. Cameron, he kind of put this referendum vote together to appease the conservative base, but it also was, he didn't think it would pass. Bringing it back to 2016, the election with, Hillary Clinton, everybody expected Hillary Clinton to win. And in this case, everyone expected that they would stay in the European Union. And they were shocked that the people of the United Kingdom voted to get out of the European Union. the percentage was 52% out and 48% stay in. So Cameron resigns. That's a thing in UK politics, is a lot of times when the prime minister seems disgraced, rather than just fight it out like in America, they just resign, which is rather odd to me. But he resigns, and now we have conservative Theresa May come into it. Her quote 3 days after she's prime minister is, "Brexit means Brexit, and we will make a success of it." So, a very exciting time for the pro-Brexit people. But one problem was May wanted to make this official, but the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom struck down her requesting to leave, and they said, you don't have the power, even though there was a referendum, to leave. That power solely rests in the parliament. And at this time, in 2017 we're in now, the parliament was not politically at the point to support Brexit. But the people in the United Kingdom are still thinking of the referendum, and they said, hey, like, what the heck? We voted to get out. We should get out. So you see these massive demonstrations across the country, kind of calling leave means leave. You also see on the bottom left-hand corner here, we have a very patriotic gentleman saying, bye-bye EU. It's over. We're getting out. I don't think we can appreciate it in America, but excuse me. This is a very politically charged time in the nation. You have sons against fathers and brothers against brothers politically, and it's very divisive. It's very sad. Now we move on to the election of 2019. Theresa May resigns, and now we see this bloke, Boris Johnson, come in. And because of the leave means leave demonstrations in the referendum, it is a complete red wave. The numbers are 400 to 200 of conservatives getting power. And in 2019, we actually see the official vote from Parliament to leave Brexit. This is much anticipated, and we're going to play it right now.
Order.
The ayes to the right, 358. The noes to the left, 234.
The ayes to the right were 358. The noes to the left were 234. So the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Programme motion move formally.
I beg to move.
The question is, as on the order paper, as many of that opinion say aye. Aye. The contrary, no. No.
Okay, there we have it, the official vote. I wanted to play that just to highlight how I think funny it is the way the UK does politics. So, you have, they have their English accents and they're going, no, no, I. I just think it's really funny. Anyway, we see Boris coming in, and December 2019, they are officially have signed legislation saying they're officially out. So, now that it's official, on 2020, they gave their decision to be out to the European Union, and in January of 2020, they entered what's called the transition period. Because you have to remember, they're so intertwined with regulations and financial systems and treaties and laws in policy that you can't just cut the tie overnight. So they enter this transition period, and for a full year, up until December 2020, they are going regulation by regulation, cutting ties with the EU. And I like this illustration here. We kind of have a gentleman drawing a colored pencil separating the British Isles off from the European Union. So another very interesting thing of Brexit is the sheer political turmoil it creates with the prime ministers. I wanted to bring up this graphic because we see before Brexit, we have, really long-standing prime ministers. We have Margaret Thatcher, John Major, Tony Blair, and then Gordon Brown. And then starting with Cameron, we start to see these very short terms of prime minister. So Cameron resigns over the Brexit referendum. Theresa May also resigns over Brexit. Boris Johnson, he resigns over scandal, but Brexit may have been related when the economy started to take a downswing. Liz Truss, economic reasons from Brexit lasted 45 days, the shortest in history. And now we have Prime Minister Rishi, and he seems like a very sound guy, but, his future is also clouded by Brexit and just how tumultuous of a time this is for the United Kingdom and the new challenges they're going to have to face. I want to show, obviously, they don't have to pay to be part of the European Union anymore, but there still is a financial cost. And this is a short 2-minute video on a farmer and how his life has changed from Brexit. So let's go ahead and watch that.
The start of a long process. This wheat is heading to a bread maker. They'll sell their product in the UK and possibly beyond. But the road ahead for British agriculture is less certain than for decades. And addressing the first National Farmers Union, or NFU, conference since Britain left the European Union, the Prime Minister paid tribute to the sector.
As we look ahead to the rest of the year, free, of course, from the shackles of the common agricultural policy, I hope that this can be the moment when we start to realise the many opportunities we now have, not just for the benefit of our fantastic farmers, for all of you, but for our entire country.
Around 3/4 of UK farm businesses say they're not viable without subsidies they get under the EU's Common Agricultural Policy. Those are being phased out by 2027 to be replaced by incentives for going green. The government says it'll pay farmers for things like anti-flooding measures, protecting wildlife habitats and planting trees.
Now that we have left the EU, new payments and incentives will reward farmers for farming more sustainably, creating space for nature on their land, enhancing animal health and welfare, and reducing carbon emissions.
But in the short term, some farmers who rely on exporting to Europe face real uncertainty. New customs checks and paperwork mean delays and extra costs. The UK currently exports around 18% of the beef it produces, while for barley the figure's around 22%. And in both those cases, the vast majority of the exports, nearly 90%, go to the European Union. So whatever trade deals Britain strikes with other countries in the next few years, many farmers here simply can't afford to ignore that European market. But for David Exwood, an NFU representative who runs this farm in southern England, the real worry lies elsewhere.
The real biggest threat to our business now is that trade deals the government will do across the world. And we could, for example, see Australian beef, South American beef coming into this country, competing directly with my cattle here at a much lower cost. And that is where the problems lie, rather than our relationship with the EU.
Still, with frictionless trade with Europe gone, some industries, like fishing, say they're fighting for their survival. Other producers want to know how they'll be helped to stay afloat in these uncharted post-Brexit waters. For its part, the government is promising golden opportunities for those prepared to change. Nadeem Barber, Al Jazeera in southern England.
So, again, just like the United States, they rely really heavily on farm, tax exemptions, farm subsidies to kind of prop them up because it's a very expensive and financially uncertain trade for these farmers. And what we see now is with the, excuse me, with the Brexit happening, is those subsidies no longer exist. And also, since they're not married to the EU anymore, like the farmer said, you're going to start seeing South American beef coming in, cheaper meats because tariffs are going to be universally the same and not favor the EU. So it's kind of a reshuffling of the deck, economically speaking. I don't think it'll be detrimental, but it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out and creates new kind of winners and losers. So again, with Brexit, although many people don't like it, the jury is still out on it. They have entered a recession, but many people, including myself, believe that's more because of the effects of COVID-19 and things of that nature. We need to remember Brexit is only 2 years old, and I don't think you can make a firm conclusion that it's awful right away, like many people have. Another thing is that the trade restrictions that the EU is placing on the United Kingdom may be to make an example out of the United Kingdom in order to warn against other states leaving as well. So they may be targeting them unfairly. And that concludes my presentation on Brexit. We talked about why it happened, the Greek debt crisis, the Syrian refugee crisis, and populism, how it happened with the referendum, parliament vote, and the uncertain future of the United Kingdom through these times. Here I have my works cited sources provided. I use mainly electronic sources, and I use the official EU website for one of my sources. Finally, I have the YouTube videos I used in my presentation, which were really helpful in putting a concise narrative into my PowerPoint. Thank you so much for listening, History Scholars. Have a good day.